Watch me code the classic game, Pong, in JavaScript. We're starting with a canvas of 800 pixels wide by 500 pixels high. Let's change the background to a nice lemon chiffon color. Okay, let's run our code by pressing the play button. Let's add variables representing the player's paddle, the AI's paddle, the ball, and a Boolean flag indicating whether the game is over. We'll add a function named initGame to create new paddle objects for the player and AI, and a new ball, as well as setting the game over flag to false. This resets the game completely. Let's define a skeleton paddle class to create our player and AI paddles. This class will cleanly organize our paddle-related code and data. Let's also create a ball class that will handle everything about the ball, like its position, color, and how it moves. Before I forget, I need to call the initGame function, the one we created earlier, to initialize our game elements. Let's also call the show and update functions for the player paddle, and show for the AI paddle. This won't do anything yet. We haven't implemented the logic, but we're just getting everything wired up at this stage. We'll also call update and show on our ball object. Okay, we can start drawing things to the screen. Let's first implement the constructor for the paddle class. We've set the paddle's vertical position to half the canvas height, given it a width of 20 pixels, a height of 100 pixels, and initialized the yChange to 0. We'll talk more about this yChange variable soon. We've also stored whether the paddle is on the left side of the screen and its color. These last two variables, isLeft and color, are the only two arguments or inputs to our constructor method. Let's fill in our show method for the paddle with its color, calculate its X position based on if it's a left or right paddle, and then draw it as a rectangle on the canvas. Now, if we run our code, we'll see both of our paddles displayed. Let's now work on getting the player paddle to move up and down. We'll add a move function to our paddle class, taking in num pixels as a parameter to set as the paddle's yChange variable. This could be a positive or negative number, depending on the direction we want the paddle to move. We can now fill in the update method. This update method will get called every time we draw the canvas, so we want to always update the paddle's Y position based on the yChange variable so that it can move. We'll need to constrain the Y value to be within our canvas. Otherwise, the paddle may fly off the screen. Before we can see our paddle move, we need to implement a function called keyPressed. This function is called once every time a key is pressed. If the user presses the up arrow, we'll call the move function on the player paddle, passing -10 as the argument, or +10 if they press the down arrow. Let's see if our paddle works now. Nice. While we're here, if the game is over, let's call the initGame function to restart the game. That way, the user can easily play again by simply pressing any key. Let's also add a key-released function that calls the move function with a parameter of 0. That way a player can stop the paddle by releasing the key. Let's start working on the ball class now. First, we'll update the ball class constructor by setting its initial position to be in the center of the canvas. We'll give it a radius of 12 pixels, an X speed of 10 pixels, and a Y speed of 4. We also set its color to the value of the color parameter passed into the constructor. Let's now write the ball's show method, calling the fill method with the ball's color and drawing it as an ellipse. If we run our code now, we should see the ball appear. We'll make the ball move by adding 2 lines in the update method that change the ball's X and Y position according to its speed. Great, the ball moves but just flies off the screen. We need to make our AI paddle smart enough to move and hit the ball. We'll do this by adding a new function to our paddle class called AI Move. Let's start implementing the AI Move method. The first thing we want to do is calculate the difference between the Y position of the ball and the Y position of the center of the AI paddle. Then, if the ball is moving across the screen towards the AI paddle, in other words, if X speed is positive, we'll move the paddle if the ball and the paddle aren't already set to collide. To make sure the paddle doesn't jump around too quickly, we'll constrain the movement of the paddle to be no more than 10 pixels at a time. Finally, we need to set Y-change and call update. Let's take a look to see if that worked. Our AI paddle is working now, but the ball just melts through the paddle like it's invisible. We need to add some collision detection. Inside the ball class, let's create a method called checkPaddle that takes in a paddle as an argument. The first thing we want to check is whether the ball will collide with the paddle's position on the Y-axis. If it doesn't, we don't need to worry about it for now. Next, if this is a left paddle, in other words, a player paddle, and the ball has gone beyond the paddle's rightmost side, then we need to invert the ball's horizontal speed and adjust the ball's position to ensure it doesn't get stuck inside the paddle. This makes the ball bounce off the paddle. Let's also do the same for the paddle on the right side of the canvas. We just need to adjust some of the calculations given. This time, the ball will bounce off the paddle's left side. Before we test our change, we need to call the checkPaddle method for both the player paddle and the AI paddle. Now we need to allow the ball to bounce off the top and bottom of the screen. To do this, we'll create a new method called edges on the ball object. Inside the edges method, we'll check if the ball has started to fly off the screen and then simply invert its Y speed. The game is now playable, but never ends. Let's check if the ball ever goes past the player's paddle and then set game over to true. Let's create a method to show a big game over message to the user when the game is over. Finally, let's call display game over method once the game is over. Our project is now finished. If you want to learn to code in bite-sized steps, like this video and subscribe. Until next time, happy coding.